Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the #1 voice of supply chain. Join us as we share critical news, key insights, and real supply chain leadership from across the globe, one conversation at a time.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton and the one and only Enrique Alvarez right here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Enrique, how you been, man? It's been a little while.
It has been a while, and it's always a pleasure kind of being here with you, sharing incredible interviews, and just spending time with you and your audience. Thanks for having me again.
You bet. I'm taking a picture because you're never in Atlanta. You're always traveling the globe, having the most interesting conversations. But I'm so glad to reconnect with you here because we're going to have an incredible conversation. You ready to go?
I am ready.
You're always ready. So, folks, we got a great show teed up here today. We're going to be featuring a supply chain leader that's doing big things in the industry, got a track record for doing even bigger things, particularly in the sporting goods world, right? In particular, we're going to be diving into how the art of forecasting has evolved over the years. If you're a big forecasting nerd, like at least I am, I'm not going to throw around any name tags there, but I know I am. This is going to be the show for you. We're going to be talking about scenarios where the supply chain team is really a startup within a much larger and established organization, and better yet, how leaders can ensure that startup success. Enrique, we're going to touch on turnaround situations. We're going to touch on the perception problem that can occur at times when we voice frank feedback, and the importance of maintaining trust no matter what we're doing. All that and a whole bunch more. Enrique, should be a great show, huh?
It will be a really good show, especially now, right? It's a very timely show, a very amazing guest to interview, and forecasting right now, it's somewhat challenging. So I'm excited to hear more about this.
Me and you both. So, folks, stick around for a great conversation that's going to offer up tons of actionable insights by the truckload or by the container load, even better. So, I want to welcome in our terrific guest here today. Jenni Staudacher brings more than 20 years of supply chain leadership and expertise to the table. So, prior to her current role, she's held supply chain leadership roles at big brands such as Adidas, Columbia Sportswear, and Nike. And you're going to love learning from our guest here today. So please join me in welcoming Jenni Staudacher, Vice President, North America Supply Chain with Salomon. Hey, Jenni, how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Wonderful to see you. Great to see you in Orlando at Gartner, and really have enjoyed learning more about your story and your journey, and excited to have you share it with our audience here today on Supply Chain Now.
Awesome. It was so good to see you in Orlando, and I really loved that conference. It was just like this boost of energy that I think we all needed right now in the midst of tariffs and all the change in the world. It was such a killer moment.
Oh, I'm with you. I am with you. Enrique, you ever been to one of these? Well, I know you have, because you're at events all the time. You've been to a trade show or leadership event where it just, to Jenni's point, it infuses you with excitement and energy. Is invigorating, and you're almost ready to get back to your team, organization, and company, and drive new change. You ever been? Does that sound familiar, Enrique?
Very familiar, and I'm an avid note taker. So I come back from these conferences usually with like tons of ideas that I want to implement, to the point that sometimes my team fears me going to some of these conferences because they have 100,000 to-dos after that. But it's engaging, it's interesting, it's fun, and for me, it's about the people, right? It's all about people, interesting, smart people that you can grow and learn from.
I'm with you. And Jenni, little side note to our lovely audience out there. You already know this because I brought this out in our earlier shows. Jenni, you're going to see Enrique probably take 20 pages of notes as you share your perspective here today. His infamous black notebook. So I can't wait. That's going to be $1 billion bestseller down the road a little bit. But anyway, Jenni, let's do this. Let's get to know you a little better. I want to start with a patented fun warm-up question. And we learned in the green room, you're passionate about many things, but before we get into supply chain, you quilt in a very uniquely and passionate manner. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So I learned sewing from my mom. I didn't start off quilting. I started making clothing that, whatever I wanted to create or we couldn't afford when I was. And from that base of learning how to sew so early, that was a lot of sews just there. Sorry. Anyways, I became a sewer early on. And as I've, grown older, I took on quilting. I learned it from actually a colleague at work. Her mom taught me how to quilt.
Okay.
when I was at Doc Martens, which was a gift that was given to me by this individual. And as I do it now, later in life, it really becomes this like clearing activity for me, where oftentimes I'll have like a work problem. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go sew it out. I'm going to go sit down. I'm going to build something. And then it's through that like operational processy that sometimes I can like unravel work problems and also, you know, realize joy through a craft, a skill. It's something that I've really honed throughout my life. And then when I over index into the production side of it, I might be setting time trials and how long it takes for me to like sew napkins and things of that nature. I might overdo it sometimes, but it's really something I love, and it's a great foundation in who I am as a person.
Jenni, I love it. You describe it in such a powerfully therapeutic manner. And it makes perfect sense. Enrique, did you hear that phrase too? Go sew it out. That appeals to me. I need to go sew out some of my challenges in this journey. How about you, Enrique?
It sounds like the title of a good book that maybe Jenni might write in the future. Go Sew It Out by
Yes,
Jenni Staudacher.
I like it.
Sew it out, the parallels between supply chain and home craft.
There you
Oh
go.
my gosh.
Wow.
I'm on a
Here we
book tour
go.
already.
Eureka moment. All right. So beyond, really quick aside, beyond quilting and sewing, you also love to snowboard.
Yes.
And I think you shared in the green room that your skill sets for snowboarding aren't quite where your sewing skill sets are. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes. So we just recently moved to Utah with this job with Salomon. And I'd say, you know, we were average, infrequent skiers and snowboarders when we lived in Portland and the Northwest, and living here in the heart of the mountains. We had to get back into it. And so my kids learned how to ski. My husband and I picked back up our snowboarding. And I think it's super fun. It's a little humbling sometimes, right? When you're like, wow, gosh, I just beat it really hard in front of my kids. But it really, I think for us, we're like, you have to do it. It's an opportunistic moment. So like, this is some of the best skiing in the world here in Utah. And so we've been all in, and it's been a really great way for us to connect with community and, you know, stay active and, you know, teach our kids to do new things and build character.
I love it. I love it. It reminds me of JFK's famous quote about we do things not because they're easy. We do them because they're difficult. That would be me snowboarding. That's exactly what I might with snowboard. Enrique, I can just, as Jenni was talking about snowboarding, I can just picture nature and getting outdoors in beautiful Utah. Could you as well?
Absolutely. And I have a very close connection to nature, ocean, mountains, snowboarding, skiing. So I can totally see how that's a fun thing to do. And I think it's important. I have two kids, as you know, and I think bringing kids and children in general to nature, I think that's something that we have lost a little bit. And it's very important. At least it was for me. And that's one of the things that my dad kind of instilled in me and my siblings.
Well said. Well said. So true. All right. Well, Jenni and Enrique, we've got a lot of supply chain conversations, supply chain ski slopes. We're going to spend a lot of time on here today. And I want to start with some more context, Jenni. You've had an incredible journey. I really enjoyed our chat a few weeks back where I was really able to learn a lot more about how you view the world, how you view leadership, how you view supply chain, a lot of great, incredible chapters in your journey. So let's start there with some context for our global audience. Prior to your current role, which we'll talk about in a second, give us one or two critical roles that really shaped your trajectory and how you view and how you think about global supply chain.
Absolutely. So I'd say the first example was when I was with Columbia Sportswear. I joined in a global supply planning function. I had no experience in that. And so I was eager to learn, really excited, thought that, you know, the production world was probably next for me. I was thinking about like getting into, you know, the work and liaison offices and really being overseas in the manufacturing base. And I received a really surprising request to move to Europe and to take on a demand planning function that was really struggling to, you know, identify what they wanted to be good at and then build momentum in that direction. I also happened to be 3 months pregnant. And I said, cool, I'll take that job as long as it's okay, I'm pregnant. And so maybe that speaks a little bit to just the I don't know, my belief and my drive. Like there are times where I'm like, I could be facing these really, challenging variables. And I'm like, well, so what? Let's, jump ready, set, if you will. Right. So I took that role and certainly attacked some particulars about planning, very quickly. Had my first child and then very quickly jumped back into the business because my husband could stay home with my newborn child. And in that role, I ultimately expanded to take on a large number of the supply chain capabilities in that market and stayed in the market for 5 years instead of 2. And thinking back on that experience, I think the key elements that I learned were, where would I stand alone? Where would I really be an individual leader and develop and drive my organization? Because, in a lot of, I'd say, entry-level managerial roles or even getting into a director level role, you're really looking around going, is that right? Should I be doing that? And based on, being an American in Europe that could have had negative perceptions about being a mole from the home office, I think that aspect of like, where could I handle being alone? Where did I need to be alone? And how could I be okay with maybe not having cheers and applause and people kind of wondering when it was all going to click and stick? Those were the key lessons in that role. And over time, really just pragmatically playing out, what's the next win you're going to get? What's the next win? Where do you need to pause? Where do you need to connect with people and bring people along? That was a success in that role. And it ultimately spanned 5 years in my career.
So initially it was planned for 2 and it went so well. You were enjoying it so much and it was benefiting the organization and the team so much. It went on for 5 years. Is that right, Jenni?
Exactly. Yes. 5 years. Indeed.
Outstanding. And one other quick clarifying question. Was that your first European-based supply chain leadership role?
Exactly. Yes, it was. It was not on my radar that I wanted to work overseas. But what has always been on my radar is there a messy problem? Do you need someone with a big shovel to fix problems? It's me, right? That has always been part of my DNA. And so those realities really came together in a super complementary way.
Love that. Let's get to your second. I think you had one other role you want to share, and then I'm going to get Enrique to comment on what we're hearing here from these critical earlier chapters in your journey.
For sure. So I was with Columbia Sportswear for 10 years, 5 years in Europe, 5 years in North America. And I'll talk about Columbia Sportswear throughout this interview. It was really, ultimately a very proficient supply chain that came together across the 10 years I was with the company. And so as I shifted to Adidas from Columbia Sportswear, which is a much larger brand globally, right? And maybe I had some pre-existing bias that made me expect that it's a German company and it's very, very structured. It was going to be like clockwork, right? And as I joined Adidas in the North America market, the supply chain really needed to be developed. And I think I severely underestimated what it would be like to really develop a seat at the table, right? In a lot of supply chain organizations, like it is day in, day out, you cannot operate without supply chain. However, in brands that are very, let's say, marketing product, culturally driven and culturally minded, the elements of supply chain might be a little bit hidden underneath the scenes, might actually be embedded in other functions, right? And so joining Adidas, and I was brought in to develop order fulfillment functional capabilities. How did I balance developing that seat at the table and also, right, driving change? You cannot wait and say, oh, I need a seat at the table before I start driving change. That'd be great. Thank you. I'll just be waiting here until I have my seat at the table. You cannot do that. So how do you create that balance? And it really came through staying incredibly close with my team, leveraging a variety of personalities and strengths and skills in the team.
Yep.
And then ultimately continuing to set up goals and approaches that would achieve not only change as well as that appropriate seat at the table.
Oh, God. Enrique, we could stay in those first 2 examples and have a couple hours of conversations, but we got so much more to get to with Jenni. Hey, Jenni, quick follow-up question before I bring Enrique in. Mm-hmm. Is it true, I heard once back when I was in school as a young man, that Adidas, maybe the founder or an early executive, All day I dream about soccer. Is Adidas really an acronym? Is that any truth to that urban legend?
I do not believe that is true.
Okay.
But Adidas friends out there, fact check me.
Okay.
Because Adidas is based on the family name of the
Okay.
founders of Adidas. Yes.
Okay. So that's probably just an urban legend that someone fooled me with when I was in third grade.
Dassler.
Enrique,
The last name is Dassler. So,
okay.
yes.
Interesting. All right, Enrique, a lot to learn from those 2 earlier chapters in Jenni's journey. Your comments.
Well, what I heard and in my experience, the taking on the challenge, right, which is something that I think it's very familiar to Jenni and her trajectory through all these different amazing companies. It's like you take the challenge on, right? Even she was pregnant, goes to Geneva, still completes the task, and I think that over and over from the research that I made, it's implementation, right? I think what really matters the most is getting things done, even if it is pausing, thinking, strategy, and of course measuring, which is something that she mentioned at the end. You have to constantly build a team and then measure the indicators so you can then continue to improve. So very, very interesting and excellent opportunities, both of them.
Well said. And there's Jenni, there is an element of fearlessness that now, as you've shared that, those previous chapters, and now I'm seeing a common theme from our earlier conversations. That phrase used, jump, ready, set. I can see how that's core to how it's in your DNA, Jenni. And we're going to talk about the other end of the spectrum, the planning and the forecasting here in a second. Let's also do this. Your current role with Salomon, who's got an incredible innovative track record. Maybe we can touch on that. Tell us about what you do in your role as VP North America Supply Chain and a little about the company.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I joined Salomon in March of 24 and soon thereafter relocated to Utah, where we have our North America headquarters. Salomon is a French company based in Annecy, France. So amazing proximity and I would say authenticity to the mountain sports. Like our focus is to really amplify the experience that people have in the mountains and really through a performance mindset. So I think it is one of the things that resonates with me most about the brand and especially picks me up, on down days. We all have down days. And
Sure.
that is, how are we elevating the performance of athletes in the mountain context? And we take that incredibly seriously. And you guys all know there's a variety of dimensions across brands that say their performance versus are really performance. And we really approach it, I would say, from a DNA and an engineering standpoint about how each and every one of our products is changing the life of people and allowing them to show up and perform in their best possible way. And I'd say certainly performance is part of my hardwiring, as well as this, really being ready to jump into new things that you just mentioned, Scott. And it's on those down days where I'm like, this performance really resonates with me. Let me think about the parallels between what we're doing as a brand and how do we just lift one tiny thing in performance today and just take that as a win.
I love that. That really I appreciate you being transparent and authentic about that, because it's so true, Enrique. We all have down days, right? Even the world-class champions of sports everywhere, they've got down days. Michael Jordan would talk about it. And of course, in my book, he's still the greatest of all time. And it's how we find eureka moments, I think, in those down days and find the motivation and how we pick ourselves up, or our teams, our organizations, you name it, to, go back to climbing the mountain, right? But your thoughts there, Enrique, what'd you hear there from Jenni?
Well, no, as you said, right, it's all about performance, and it's one of those true brands that really, they don't say performance just for the sake of saying performance. They actually were born out of performing, right? If you see the Olympics, and I don't know a lot about downhill skiing. I mean, I'm originally from Mexico, so we didn't have that kind of snow, but you recognize the brand, right? Salomon's always there. You can see it in all the Olympic athletes, and that speaks very, very highly of how committed they are to performance and the mountains. And it's great to see how they're evolving. And I know that you're going to ask a couple of questions to Jenni later on how that kind of evolves towards where they're trying to participate right now. But that's that's something that not a lot of brands, I think, have been able to pull off, right? Staying in that performance area and then maybe launching one or two other very performance-driven brands as well.
Yes. And as we all know, what drives world-class gold medal winning performance, just to borrow that analogy, in 2025 isn't necessarily what's going to drive the same, best in industry performance in 2030, maybe even 2026,
Absolutely.
maybe even before the end of the year. And of course, there is a lot of evolution in that. One last comment about Salomon, Jenni, and I've asked you this a couple times, and I got to write it down this time. There's one in particular skiing related innovation that some folks may not know that Salomon is responsible for creating. What was that, Jenni?
It's the modern ski binding. So where you step in and you click
Yes.
in, and they all work the same way. And maybe you've walked outside of the bistro and you're getting back on the slopes, and everyone goes, Salomon invention. Yes.
That clicking sound, everyone across the globe that's ever skied knows exactly what you're talking about now. Even me, who haven't skied in, 20 years. Enrique, you know exactly what Jenni's talking about.
I know what you're talking about. How was it before? I mean, I can imagine skiing without the clicking kind of bindings.
As a snowboarder, I do not know.
Okay.
No, but you're
Probably
right.
rope and duct tape, Enrique. Something
Well,
really.
whatever it is, it brought the sport to a lot of people, right? Because it made it easier and faster. And of course, I think, again, not a professional skier by any means, but I'm sure that the way that you are bound to the skis improved the performance a lot. So
True.
Exactly. Yes.
So true. All right. And there's a safety component there too, I'm sure. So I'll leave
absolutely,
that to
'cause
the
it can-
engineers
you're right.
though. Enrique and Jenni, we got a lot more to get to here. And as Enrique, his crystal ball's working, Jenni, his crystal ball's working, because I do want to ask you about your love. I want to ask you about several of your other passions and observations more related to leadership and supply chain. And one of them is your love for forecasting. So I got a two-part question for you. Number one, where does that love for forecasting come from? And number two, how do you see this art of forecasting and how we do it, the craft? How has it evolved and changed over the years?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing this up. I love forecasting. And when I say it, people are like, oh, that's like saying you love Brussels sprouts. I guess Brussels sprouts have, been reborn recently with roasting them and glazing them. But, it's like saying that you love like a really not tasty vegetable, right? And because it's oftentimes this big, scary thing in the business that isn't correct. And everyone's quick to raise their hand and say, the first rule of forecasting is all forecasts are wrong. Or maybe we use words like guess or take a swing at it, things like that. And when I was reflecting on this and why do I love forecasting, I think it's, for me, really that shift from theoretical to physical. And if you think about the continuum of supply chain and you think about, distributing any sort of packaged goods, there's a point in time where you go from concept and possibility, and I would like this to be, to physical, and you start creating an item and actually taking demand and realizing that demand after you've shaped the supply behind it and things like that. So I think for me, why I really love forecasting is that you can take a plan and you can understand the assumptions that sit underneath it. And then when things change, because they always will, how do you lever and tinker with those assumptions, or maybe we would call them level 2 KPIs that sit underneath the waterline on that particular, demand on that forecast. And then you don't do that to say, you know what, Enrique, this is your fault. You're wrong. You were wrong. Your forecast was wrong. Or you know what, Scott, you did not show up that day. And in fact, we did not get that assumption. And as a consequence, let's get into the blame game. You take those level 2 KPIs and then you say, oh, let's get down to business. Let's start doing some demand shaping. How do you realize how those assumptions are behaving? And then say, so what? I don't care. I'm going to move forward and I'm still going to get us as close as possible to that end goal. And I think that's really the distinction between demand shaping versus the camp that maybe overloves or over indexes into forecast accuracy. And this is something that I really learned from Lisa Kulak, who shaped the supply chain. She's the CSCO at Columbia Sportswear. She shaped the supply chain, I would say, off of a foundation of forecasting and planning. And if you do not have that in place, trying to build other capabilities when you do not know if you're going north, south, hitting a number or not, it's incredibly hard. And I'd say from that learning and working with her at Columbia Sportswear, that is a blueprint that I've repeated again and again and again in subsequent roles.
Interesting. And one quick follow-up in terms of the evolution and our ability to shape demand and really, might sound dramatic, predict the future better than perhaps ever before, especially here in the golden age of technology. Quick observation about how that's impacted this evolution.
Yeah, I think technology is only as good as your ability to realize it. So if you have, I'm going to say, a rubbish instance of your ERP that does not serve you well, you do not have cleanliness and hygiene in your order book or your supply plan or your MRP, things like that, layering on AI to solve your problems will not do it, right? Additionally, if you do not have team members who are skilled analytically or in those systems and tools, again, AI is not going to solve that for you. So I think it's, you'll find through this conversation and, anyone that I'm close with in my career, I really believe in, what do you own in your house? What can you do with what you have today? How do you open up the virtual fridge of your capabilities in your supply chain or your function and say, that's what I got to work with. Let's get creative. What can I do with it? And I really view technology in that same way. You have to be rooted in what you have from an ingredient standpoint, how your resources can leverage and activate that, and does an ingredient of, some really powerful systems and technology make sense? And if that answers yes, let's go ahead and do that. Otherwise, let's start playing a game of, let's postpone trying to make some other achievements in our long range or mid range plan so that we can double down. If AI is the thing we must do, they can give us beautiful statistic forecasts of what demand should be, then be really clear about what you're not going to do in order to focus and force that investment in that space.
Jenni, I like it. And going back for the first part of your response, Enrique, she talked about the fundamentals and, of course, also the human element, right? If we don't have those two things in place, and there's probably a few others, but especially those two big things, throwing the best and shiniest technology at the problem is going to do no good. In fact, it's going to do the opposite of no good. It's going to create consternation and friction and burnout. But Enrique, that's just what I heard. What'd you hear there from Jenni?
No, I heard that, and then also how she thinks about AI, which I agree with her, which is more in terms of what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it as well. And so if you don't have like really good, realistic information and good data sets, then AI cannot really help you because they'll be modeling things out of something that's already wrong to start with. So to Jenni's point, I think technology is very important to use it. And of course, it's very important to leverage it. But I think there has to be a plan, and you have to use your capabilities and rely on your capabilities and your culture in particular for certain companies to succeed. So that's really good, I guess, suggestion or note for everyone else that's listening, to all your listeners, Scott.
Agreed. Focused. Well scoped. Yeah. This is what we're doing. This is what we're not doing. Also, what I heard there from Jenni, which is great advice.
Don't rush into investing in new things just because people think they're new things, right? It's just a much more strategic approach.
It's a recipe for disaster in many cases. All right, let's do this. I want to talk supply chain startups with you, Jenni. One of my favorite topics. You've been in a few roles. I think you alluded to this earlier. Where the supply chain team within the organization was within oftentimes a older, more established organization, with a supply chain organization within it was newer, was a startup. So I want to ask you, what is critical, maybe when other leaders find themselves in that situation, to fueling that startup's success? What would you say to that, Jenni?
Well, I think it comes down to a few really important themes. First and foremost, relationships. And if you think about the relationship that you're building in your organization, it can be scary to know that, hey, maybe we're not on the mark where we need to be from a performance standpoint, or maybe an integration standpoint, right? That's scary. So how do you immediately start establishing trust that we're one team? And even if we talk about things that aren't working well, that's cool, right? The upside is what we're really focused on. But, everyone internalizes that very differently, and you have to be very conscious of how do you really create that trust within your team. When it comes to the stakeholders in the organization, those relationships are incredibly important. And again, everyone's unique, so they're going to want you to show up in different ways. Some people are going to want you to fall on the sword, right? Some people are going to want you to walk in and say, I actually already have a 90-day plan. This is exactly what we should be doing right now. I think with leadership advisement about how do I approach these critical stakeholders and gather a little bit of that information, especially like from the president or an executive in the organization that can sponsor you, that can go a long way. For both those audiences, you got to speak about what's in it for me. You got to individualize that into really, this is what you're going to gain, whether that's in the team, whether that's with a stakeholder. This is how, when we get to the other side of this change, you're going to realize a variety of benefits that I already know you want and need. A piece that comes alongside of this, oftentimes, I would say my third point is really around education, right? Supply chain can be this mythical thing. If we were having this conversation, let's see, 5.5 years ago, the fluency in our market, in the world around the importance of supply chain would be far lower. Everyone knows that we're the people that somehow created a toilet paper shortage or enabled a toilet paper purchase for people around the world, right? We all learned through COVID the importance of supply chains. And just a month ago, while I was having a conversation with a beloved colleague in the ADC, the leader of our footwear business, Seb Dahan, he said, people do not know exactly what demand planning can do. Now that's so close to the three of us, right? We know we could wake up in the middle of the night if we were asked by, a police officer that walked into our home and said, tell me what demand planning is. Boom, tell you, right? But there is this, I'd say, blind spot for supply chain professionals. You don't know what others don't know. So how do you lean into that, opportunity to educate? And it's not through the lens of like, you don't know this, I know this, I'm smarter than you. It's really about, I'm going to listen to what your challenges are. I'm going to test, maybe some understandings or capabilities that might solve that. And I'm going to listen and say, do people really understand what sits within supply chain and how supply chain can be an enabler? And from there, really tailor out what this educational journey would be. And then I think the final pieces, along both those, tracks with people as well as education, how do you make small deposits? How do you build momentum? How do you create those small wins? And really continue to stay close with your partners and how supply chain is going to come to life with them.
Enrique, we just got a framework from Jenni there, and I'm not going to capture everything, but the WIFM, which is so universally important, what's in it for me, the WIFM, and regularly answer that question, but when they're not even asking, the criticality of communications, the criticality of education, and that awareness piece too, which awareness can be a very powerful education tool and need. The vision, she also touched on. And then perhaps one of my favorite things she mentioned is building momentum through quick wins. And one of my favorite quotes with one of the first female FedEx executives that we interviewed here a couple years ago, to paraphrase her quote, we move mountains through millions of small nudges. And I love that visual. But Enrique, what'd you hear there when your supply chain team is in startup mode?
Well, I'll add one more to the list. That's just the first one that you mentioned, which is relationships, right? And trust. For me, trust comes with it's one of the most important ingredients when it comes to building a successful team, no matter what team you're talking about. And I think that's something that she, of course, mentioned at the beginning, and then celebrating the small wins. And one thing that I loved about the things that she said is education, but not taking education as I am the teacher, here's the way you're going to do it. It's about listening And I think listening is the only way you can then win trust. And then once you have everyone's stakeholders, you listen to them, you listen to what they need, then you can kind of start putting all these things together and building a strong supply chain network. So no, this is a great masterclass, I would say, on how to actually start and maybe even revitalize supply chains if companies already have some.
Well said, Enrique. Listening, gosh, timeless truth there. It's like old Judge Judy, famed supply chain practitioner. Her phrase she'd always say, "You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You're meant to listen more than talk," right?
Yep.
To paraphrase the $20 million a year judging justice professional, I'll call it. I don't know. Anyway, so let's. Jenni, great advice there. And clearly you've been there and done it numerous times in your career. Let's talk about a similar, maybe a cousin to the startup, the turnaround, right? You've got a proven track record for turning around organizations and moving those metrics from the red to the green, or maybe to the black, maybe a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
Couple of your core go-to tools in your toolbox for turnarounds, Jenni.
Well, this is a shocking thing I'm going to share with you here. And this comes from a great friend. Her name is Rachel Curvan. I worked with her at Adidas. And she says, every minute you spend in planning saves 10 minutes in execution, right? So how do you spend some time getting really, really clear about what you're trying to achieve? And in that is common ground, right? So if you're in a situation, the sky is falling, right? We've all been there, like a performance indicator falls off, or a building is ill performing, or we're suddenly surprised with this clash of inbound freight that's coming in off of one of many, COVID related issues. How do you sit down and straight up get common ground, right? Because especially if it's a really high intense episode that's happening right now, like a million people could be driving in a million directions and it has a fantastic intent behind it and it can create chaos. So how do you initially really level set and create common ground with your community that you need to address this turnaround with? Second thing is goals. And I want to spend a little bit of time here. There's, a lot of times where someone could say, this shouldn't happen. I want it to be different. Results must be within this corridor. And, the shoulds, the coulds, the hopes, right? Those are not great levers in how to activate and motivate people. And so from a goal setting standpoint in my organization, the greatest success I can have is to create an environment where my team members feel very open to share the good and the bad and the ugly. To also share what would bring them joy and realization to the highest degree in their job, right? And then how do you want those goals to be shaped? When do you want to work on them? When do you think you have resources? What do you want to avoid? And then putting that together across an organization like a supply chain and really stacking it up and saying, wow, does this coordinate? Does it sync together? Are we making adaptations and changes in how we manage inventory that's connected with how we're going to realize shipping, right? Do those things actually play together? And then the final piece, really on top of the level set and having that common ground and setting the goals, is orienting the organization to be driven through a performance culture. And, many organizations have their own competencies that they focus on from a performance management standpoint. Thankfully in the industry I've been in, there's a lot of parallels with sports, right? Sitting down and watching a World Cup game and saying, wow, how did Messi do that in that moment? And then what are the parallels to our business? That's super inspiring. In a simple way, you can sit down with your team and say, what are our values? When people talk about us and we're not in the room, how would we want them to describe how we drive our function? And simply go through an exercise of, okay, but why is that important? But what does that really look like? What are the sort of accountabilities that would demonstrate that performance culture? What are the sort of actions? So my team just did this in January this year, my leadership team. And we came out with 5 performance culture drivers. trust, collaboration, process management. I'm going to forget one. I can't believe I'm doing this while we're talking live. Trust, collaboration, process management, effective meetings.
Effective meetings. Everybody hates a meeting that never needed to be a meeting. Is that right, Jenni?
Exactly. And we have a lot to meet about. We have a lot to talk about, right? So through those 5 pillars of our performance culture, that's how we're trying, and again, in small ways, to really activate that energy and that gas that will fuel your team to nurture those amazing relationships, to continue to have that common ground, and to subsequently drive your goals.
Jenni, love it. I love pillars. I love frameworks. It kind of goes back to the mathematics and sewing. I bet there's something in my DNA that I need to have that structure. But I want to start, Enrique, before I get your thoughts. My favorite part, all of that was so actionable and practical, but way back at the front end, she shared something that, especially the global nature of supply chain, we need to take to heart, and that's finding a way to form that common ground, whether it's with your suppliers, with your team members, with your customers, whatever it is, right? We have to get stuff done through a variety of beautiful languages and beautiful customs and communities and cultures, you name it. We've got to be better as an industry at starting with finding that common ground. And in fact, it goes beyond supply chain, but I won't get too dramatic. But Enrique, what'd you hear there in terms of go-to from Jenni about turnarounds?
Well, kind of taking it a step, next step to that you said is just building this performance culture. I think it's critical, right? And I think it has to do with accountability, and it has to be with people being very clear about what the goals are and how would you define that culture. I think that's something that most companies don't really do, and something that Jenni clearly has done, right? It's not only about developing this performance culture, but what does that even mean? I mean, let's just come up with 5 drivers that describe a performance culture that we want in our organization. And honestly, for me, then people will self-select out of that. High performers kind of thrive when you have the right culture, and then it will be very easy to also weed out people that just don't perform. And I think it's very important. Maybe Jenni implied it, but for me and my company, it's really just taking that next step and saying, well, high performance will thrive on this. People that are not thriving means that they're probably not the best people for our organization. You have to also
just a bad fit.
Quickly.
Yeah.
And I love the fire it sparks, right?
Right.
I always use the number 5. I'm like, if we have in any given point in time 5 early adopters, or people who are like, ooh, I'm going to go out on this limb and like really, get into performance, that catches like wildfire, because people are like, oh, I want that success. That looks enjoyable. That person's newer than me. How are they doing that? And I'm not doing that. Like, the contagiousness, I think, is incredibly interesting to watch, and to really let people self-select, choose your own adventure. Like, the sky's the limit. Like, there is no limit on what you can achieve in this role or finding your future role. Like, are you game? Do you want to be part of this?
Love it.
It's great. And I love that you actually mentioned analogy with Messi and soccer, right? And that's very, very close to me. But you're right. Like, people looking from the outside in to an organization like the one that you have, and I'm sure like your team, see it a lot easier than what it really is. But it's something that you've been working on your entire life. Since Messi was 5 years old, he's been actually working hard to achieve what he has now. So it's amazing that you can inspire people to perform to the way that maybe you didn't even think possible either, right, when you started.
Exactly.
Well said. Well, so I wish I could play soccer like you, Enrique. It wasn't meant to be. Jenni, a lot of good stuff there. I want to shift gears as we kind of start to come down the home stretch here of an outstanding masterclass, like Enrique coined it. That's what we're getting here. Very practical, been there, done that. Masterclass in supply chain leadership. So, Jenni, in our phone call a few weeks ago, as we were getting to know each other and I was learning more about your journey, you shared something with me that I'd love for you to explore with us here. You're very proud to be an outspoken woman. an outspoken supply chain leader and business leader. But sometimes as you mentioned, it can create a perception problem with others. Tell us more about that.
For sure. So thanks for asking that. As you mentioned, I am a proud woman in supply chain. There are moments where I've walked into rooms and I'm the only woman, right? Or you're the newest woman and there wasn't a woman before, right? Or women are only holding, administrative functions rather than, these driving functions. And so I have been gifted with the strengths, if you guys are familiar with strength finders, of activator, arranger, and achiever.
Okay.
And I call them the AAA when I talk about it with my team. I got the AAA, right? And what that means that I'm always going to be looking into a situation and analyzing it and really understanding what's living and breathing in it and what is that problem, right? Ultimately, I like to joke, listen, if there were no problems, there wouldn't be a supply chain because things would be easy and perfect and you wouldn't need supply chain. So our nature and our heart is to rip apart problems and to remedy them for the future. And I think in some cases, especially in cultures that might not be as direct, if I contrast working in Europe, there's a lot of direct communication. And part of that is, based on, communication and language and dialects and history and things like that. And so when I lived there, I experienced that in some cases, I needed to be more direct than what I was comfortable with, which can be a contrast to places in the United States that are not as direct. So I think, really kind of understanding your communication style as a female leader, especially in a space where maybe there aren't as many female leaders. And if you're going to be maybe sharing information that is disruptive, I'm not going to shame any woman for talking about problems and things like that. It really takes, I would say, some careful curation and some thoughtfulness. And I, again, do not like saying, you know what, women, you can change, you can adapt yourself and be something different. But right. In the end, being successful is so inherently important to any supply chain leader. And so I would recommend this for anyone, regardless of gender. And I want to quickly look at my notes so I don't miss anything here, because I did prepare for this one. Sure. And I think the curiosity piece, ask questions, right? Even if you sometimes know the answer, really dig into the listening. Layer on a helping of validation. I have heard you say that this is troubling to your organization and it cannot continue. I want to double down on that I am absolutely allergic to it, right? So how do you spend that time really making sure you're curious, you're listening, and that you have really captured that you are on the same page with someone else? And then, really work the conversation through, let's talk about the problem at hand. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. It's not going to be the blame game, but we got to kind of understand some root cause and some driver stuff. Cool. We've now identified those things.
Yep.
Pepper in probably some humor, right? And then how do we move on to the action state, right? And really, I'd say, facilitate that conversation. On top of that, follow up. Hey, thank you for that conversation. I know that might have been difficult. I know that might have been uncomfortable to talk about that in such plain language. I speak from that place so that we can get to this common ground as soon as possible and then find our way forward. So those are the techniques that I use, I would say, on a day-to-day basis, knowing that I'm a direct woman and knowing sometimes that might be landing into a context that isn't familiar or comfortable with that. On top of that, I do want to plug my new favorite book of 2025.
Okay.
So I have it right here. It is called Likeable Badass.
Okay.
This is a must read for anyone. I would recommend this to anyone. And why I say that this is the book of the year for me is that it has a really beautiful, easy framework about finding this sweet spot in collaboration and communication. I'm trying to find it here. I should have marked my pages better before this interview. But it really triangulates, how do you maintain this sweet spot of being friendly and strong, right? Assertive and warm. And so there's a lot of great feedback and exercises where you can really reflect on yourself in this book. And then more importantly, it talks about in the second half, like, how are you like nurturing your status, right? Especially as people rise through different roles in the organization or shift organizations. No one has that history with you. They don't know that you did X, Y, and Z and wore a cape, 5 years ago in the past. Or maybe they don't, maybe that's time's moved on. So how are you nurturing your status? How are you promoting yourself as your organization? And then how are you playing that out within your networks? So love this book. It's fantastic. If anyone wants to talk about it with me, hit me up on LinkedIn. This is the money book.
The author is
Allison Fregal. How would you pronounce that? I don't know.
Maybe Fregal or maybe Fregali. It depends. But Dr. Allison.
Words. Sorry.
Dr. Allison, thank you. Likeable badass. Go get your copy. Folks, if you're watching or listening this episode and you send in your favorite takeaway from Jenni here today, we're going to have a drawing for a couple copies of that book. So let us know what you love about this great masterclass with Jenni Staudacher. All right, Enrique, I got to get your favorite part. A very unfair question, because there's a lot of good stuff Jenni shared. One of my favorite themes she shared there was, while we all have development opportunities, every single one of us, it's so important for us to be authentic, but also to create an environment where our team members can be authentic. Because who wants to live a lie? Imagine having to work in supply chain with all the pressure and stuff we have to do, and not be comfortable to be yourself. That's an awful thing, and it goes on. Enrique, what'd you hear there from Jenni?
Well, as you said, it's actually a tough question to answer because she said a lot of really interesting things. But I really like the fact that she kept throwing out the word listening here, listening there. And so I feel like actually trying to come and develop a successful team and a performance-driven organization, you have to level set, listen more than you talk, and then of course then inspire people to achieve greatness. So it was a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And AAA, new nickname maybe for Jenni Staudacher. I like that. Going back to the strength finders, I can see the activator. I can't remember those other two A's, but I can see that. So Jenni, two quick hitters as we start to wrap here. One of your core beliefs when it comes to your leadership approach, and we've kind of heard this through some of your different responses here, how you evangelize regularly. It's a part of your mantra. What is possible? Keeping that in front of people. Why is that critical?
Definitely. So I think why that's possible is, first of all, we all work in supply chain. So last report was no one had a perfect supply chain. So there is still opportunity for us to grow and advance. And so I think it's really fundamentally why supply chain leaders are in place. So I think one thing that's incredibly important to think about, especially for those of us who have changed organizations, is what is the nature of possibility and potential in the culture that you are in, and really paying sharp mind to that in the context. And I mentioned it earlier, like, how does the possibility of supply chain correlate with the possibility of marketing? And are those two things connected and coordinated, and really bridging that? The other piece is connecting with your executive team. This is what I think our possibility is. Do you see something different? Oh, and you're not aware of where we actually should be building capabilities and strength. How do you marry that together? And then really bring that into that goal setting conversation that we talked about with your team. We talked about it, 5-10 minutes ago. How are you connecting the executive ambition and maybe even resetting it a little bit more, and then dropping that down into your organization to really work after it? The other two thoughts that I had on this topic is really around when you're in a situation where maybe change isn't welcome, or change isn't the mindset, or maybe we're really stuck in today where we can't see past this thing in front of us. And how do you get people to open up to the possibility? And I think, again, that takes time, and it takes that relationship and trust, but really understanding like where do you think we should be driving change or creating
Right.
possibilities. What would actually make your life better at work? I love this question. What would make your life better at work? What would make you want to wake up and run into the office? What would make you want to work on Saturdays? I'm not suggesting people work early hours on Saturdays, but what would
Right.
really light your fire? People give you surprising answers there that can unlock possibilities and change. Similarly, what's an area of interest or a talent you have that we're not leveraging? You'd be surprised how many people go, oh, did you know that I actually have a degree in economics and I am so, attuned to analysis? Boom. Wow. You weren't in a role in our organization and we could leverage this. So I think it comes back to what's in it for them. How do you really get to the heart of some influencers in your organization, some early adopters, open them up to the possibility of change, and then start co-creating? Cool. We now have this common ground. I think I heard you say this. We need to drive more analysis in our organization. Is that something you might want to lead, or do you want to advise on it? Or what are your recommendations? How do you get skin in the game on these topics of change for maybe people who don't feel like they are change leaders or maybe aren't naturally geared in that way?
I love it. And folks, find 5 of them. Find 5 of them, as Jenni was saying earlier, and you can really create some wildfire. I'm going to ask you one more quick question, then get Enrique to weigh in. As we start to wrap here, maintaining trust. We've talked about trust numerous times throughout today's chat. And, it can be difficult at times to maintain that trust, especially when we're trying to solve big problems, small problems, all problems in between. Quick tip there, Jenni.
Yeah, so I'd say creating a culture of feedback and having ongoing feedback and dialogue, really enabling your leaders in your organization to set the pace and to be clear about when they need to reset it. We just talked about this last week in my team. I said, change the dates. If these dates and these outcomes aren't feasible, change them. People are like, really? I was like, yeah, well, it's not going to happen anyway. So let's update our strategy, right? And let's be really clear with ourselves. And in a sense, give ourselves grace. There are a lot of things you have to reset in leading a supply chain. And then I think the final piece is really recognizing. And that's not recognition for perfect results and getting a gold on the scorecard of Dick's Sporting Goods. No, that's for every little step. In fact, I think we should celebrate where people try and fail and say, oops, that happened, more than anything else, because that's what you want. You want people out there actioning, trying, seeing what's going to stick, and then quickly realizing, oops, that wasn't exactly it. I need to pivot, right? So I think those are the key ingredients to building trust in the organization.
Love it, Jenni. Very actionable and practical, and brilliant, like all of your advice here today. I love practical advice that we can really operationalize. I think that's the missing piece, and so much training out there, and leadership advice and coaching. It's got to be something you can put it into practice. Enrique, let's do this before we make sure folks know how to connect with Jenni. I'll tell you, we have gotten quite the conversation in. And I'm going to ask you another unfair question, Enrique. Very unfair. When you think of one of your favorite takeaways from the last hour with Jenni Staudacher, what rises up to the top, Enrique Alvarez?
Wow, I actually thought I already answered that question just in the previous question.
Hey, I'm going to go back and get another one.
All right, well, let's get another one. The quilting was unexpected and incredible, so that's probably is a good way of surviving in supply chain. I don't know if you actually got that connection, Jenni, between your passion for quilting and then supply chain, but maybe that is one of those hidden gems that she shared with us that we probably didn't catch at the time.
Maybe so. And
right in nature, having as you're resolving all these issues, as you're putting all these performance organizations in place, as you try to really find those 5 people that you can build the fire on, maybe you also need to go back to nature. Maybe you also need to have something where you can be a bit more quiet by yourself, thinking strategical. And maybe that's one of those things that could be a good takeaway that might not have been super obvious.
I think that's a great one. Enrique, we're getting a bonus takeaway from Enrique Alvarez. I would add my own spin to that I heard from Jenni, and great advice for folks out there. Whatever it is, whether it's quilting or sewing or snowboarding or playing golf like Enrique, whatever it is, it's so important to find that outlet, right? Our industry is so well known for the pressure and the friction and the challenges and the problems and all the good stuff too. But we got to take care of ourselves, right? We got to take care of ourselves. Don't feel obligated to answer that email on Saturday morning. It's okay to close that laptop sometimes and find that balance, which is another great piece of advice we got from Jenni. You know, we're balancing so many needs from our roles and so many needs from our customers and and for ourselves. We got to find that balance that works for all of those important stakeholders and take care of ourselves. So Enrique, I think it was a great call out, and I'm so glad we started on where Jenni gets to step out and get her own therapeutic outlets there. And Jenni, whether it is someone that wants to come and talk with you about anything you've shared here, maybe they want to chat about Likeable Badass, the book there from Dr. Or anything else, how can they connect with you, Jenni Staudacher?
Awesome. So I'd say, first of all, LinkedIn. And secondly, if you happen to be at the Outdoor Retailer Show this summer in Salt Lake City, Utah, I will be on a panel during Industry Day, which is on June 17th. So I'll be there in person. And otherwise, grab me on LinkedIn and we will certainly connect.
Outstanding. Jenni, I really wish we had a couple more hours with you. I'm sure you got a full plate and you wouldn't have time, but I've really enjoyed the last hour with you here on Supply Chain Now. You shared up your, again, you've been there, done that, supply chain leadership perspective. Big thanks to Jenni Staudacher, Vice President, North American Supply Chain with Salomon. Jenni, I look forward. I may not be there at the June 17th event, but I do hope to see you out in person, and we're going to do this in person next time. How's that sound?
Perfect. Love it.
Outstanding. Enrique Alvarez, enjoyed your reflections and commentary on Jenni's thoughts here today. I want to make sure, folks, if you can't get enough of Enrique Alvarez, if you're like me, you just can't get enough of Enrique Alvarez, find Logistics with Purpose wherever you get your podcasts. One of my favorite things about that series, which has been running long for years now, is its positivity fueled leadership, oftentimes with supply chain and logistics tie-ins there, but folks that are changing the world, and some of the most inspiring stories you're going to find. And Enrique, folks can find that wherever they get their podcast, right?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to Jenni. This was a pleasure being here.
No doubt. Big thanks to Enrique Alvarez. Big thanks to Jenni Staudacher. Folks, what an outstanding show. But you got homework. Right? You've got to take one thing you heard. Just take one thing. Let's just start with the easier stuff. Take one thing you heard here from Jenni or from Enrique. Share it with your team. Put it into practice. We're going to change how global supply chain and how work gets done through deeds, not words. So big thanks again, Jenni Staudacher, Vice President Supply Chain with Salomon. Big thanks to Enrique Alvarez. Always a big pleasure to co-host these sessions with you, Enrique. Big thanks to our audience members out there. Really appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for your endless feedback. Keep it coming. Again, we got the book offer. I keep forgetting, Likeable Badass. Give us your feedback on this episode, and you'll be in the running to get your own copy of the book on the house. But whatever you do, on behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton challenging you, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. We'll see you next time, right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Join the Supply Chain Now community for more supply chain perspectives, news, and innovation. Check out supplychainnow.com, subscribe to Supply Chain Now on YouTube, and follow and listen to Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts.